I woke up that morning with a weird kind of jitter in my chest, like a mix of excitement and nerves tangled together so tightly I could barely breathe. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. My graduation, years of late nights, endless assignments, and self-doubt all led to this exact moment. I kept telling myself, I've worked for this moment for years. I can't wait to see their faces. I opened my closet and stared at the cap and gown hanging there, perfectly pressed. I ran my fingers along the silky fabric and imagined how it would feel to wear it, the weight of accomplishment on my shoulders, the little tassels swinging as I walked. I even picked out the right shoes, the ones that didn't squeak on the polished floor, and laid them neatly beside my desk. On the desk, my textbooks, certificates, and that stupid little paperweight that had sat there for years all seemed to shine brighter this morning. Like they knew today was special. I caught myself checking the mirror again and again. My reflection smiled back at me, though the nerves made my eyes jitter around. I tried to keep my hair neat, my shirt straight, but every small imperfection felt amplified. My reflection became a reminder, a sort of pep talk. You've got this. Today is yours. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling across my desk in golden beams. The light hit the tassel just right, making it glint. I reached out, touched it, and for a moment I imagined the applause, the sound of hundreds of strangers clapping as my name was called. I pictured my parents in the crowd, proud smiles on their faces, maybe even a little teary-eyed. I could almost hear their voices. We're so proud of you. Just the thought made my heart swell. I remember the long nights of struggling through assignments while they watched TV in the living room, occasionally offering a word of encouragement. It wasn't always easy, but I thought, maybe this day would make it all feel worth it. I packed my bag slowly, carefully placing the rolled-up certificates and the little memento I had kept from my first year of college, a tiny figurine my mom had given me, on top. Everything had a place, everything felt intentional. I was ready to step into the world with confidence, if only for a few hours, and feel that validation I had been chasing since the first day I stepped into this campus. By the time I was fully dressed, the nerves had transformed into a strange, humming anticipation. My heart thumped with each passing second, a rapid rhythm that both excited and terrified me. I grabbed my phone, checked the time, and couldn't help but smile. Today was supposed to be perfect. Today, everyone would see the me I had worked so hard to become. Little did I know, the day I had dreamed of for years would twist into something I could never have imagined. The drive to the graduation venue felt surreal. The streets looked different somehow, as if I was seeing them through a lens of anticipation and anxiety. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see my parents' faces lighting up with pride. But when I finally saw them in the passenger seat, something felt off. They were quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, layered, and unfamiliar. My mom fiddled with her necklace, her fingers twisting the chain nervously, while my dad stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands gripping the steering wheel like it held the answers to something I wasn't supposed to know. I tried to make eye contact, forced a small smile, but it felt like it disappeared into a void between us. As we parked, and I stepped out. The excitement I had carried all morning began to waver. I scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces, eager for a smile, a clap, any sign that I belonged here in this moment. And then I noticed them again, my parents. They weren't moving with the crowd. They weren't laughing at the familiar jokes or whispering congratulations. They were distant, like spectators to someone else's story. That I swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising unease. Maybe they're just nervous, I told myself. Maybe this is just how they show support. But the pit in my stomach didn't budge. Every step I took toward the entrance felt heavier, like the air itself was resisting me. Inside the auditorium, the noise was overwhelming. Cheers, clapping, people greeting each other. It all blurred into a chaotic hum. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I searched the crowd, hoping for even a flicker of the warmth I had imagined this morning. My friends waved at me, some laughing, some hugging tightly. And then I saw my parents again. They weren't waving. They weren't smiling. My mom's lips were pressed into a thin line, eyes cold, almost unreadable. My dad had a frown that didn't match the occasion, his arms crossed in a way that made me feel small. The gulf between the vision I had carried for months and this reality hit me like a slap I wasn't ready for, that I tried to ignore it, to focus on my own excitement. But every cheer from the crowd, every clap for another graduate, felt like a reminder that the people whose approval I craved the most weren't here for me. Not really. I felt an ache in my chest, a whisper of doubt creeping in. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Why are they like this? The ceremony began, and I moved forward with the other graduates, my hands shaking slightly as I adjusted my cap. The announcer called out names, and one by one, my peers walked across the stage, receiving applause, smiles, and pride. And I realized, slowly, painfully, that my parents' absence from this emotional connection wasn't accidental. Their distance wasn't temporary. It was deliberate, and the reality of that hit harder than I could have imagined. Even amidst the music, the cheering, the smiles from friends and strangers, a cold knot of confusion and sadness formed in my stomach. Today, a day I had pictured as a culmination of love and pride, already carried the first whispers of heartbreak. Then it happened. The moment that would be burned into my memory forever. I don't even remember the exact words at first, just the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears, echoing louder than anything else in the room. My parents, sitting in the audience, looked at me with faces I could no longer recognize. It started with a whisper. My dad leaned toward my mom, a tone sharp enough to slice through the celebratory noise around us. I caught a few fragments. We can't do this anymore, not after everything. My chest tightened, and for a second, I thought I'd misheard. I blinked, hoping that somehow it would make sense. Maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe it was about something else. But no. The words came again, louder this time, clear and deliberate. My parents were disowning me, right here at my own graduation, in front of everyone. They spoke as if the years of my hard work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, meant nothing. I remember standing frozen, gripping the edge of my chair, like it was the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. That I wanted to speak. I wanted to shout, to beg, to explain, anything. But my throat had gone dry, and the room seemed to tilt around me. Laughter and applause continued from other graduates, but it felt like it was happening in a parallel universe, far away from me. The words echoed in my mind. We no longer support you. We don't want you in our family. A flashback hit me like a punch. I saw the first time my mom had hugged me after a bad grade in middle school, whispering, "You'll get through this. I believe in you." I remembered my dad cheering at my first soccer game, clapping so loudly that strangers smiled at our little bubble of pride. And now, all of that seemed like a cruel illusion. The people who had once been my anchors had turned their backs. Tears welled up, and I hated them. I hated that they could cause this much pain, and I hated myself for feeling the way I did. How could they do this? How could they not even pretend to care? I thought. The injustice of it burned, hotter than anything I had ever felt before. I could see the whispers of neighbors and relatives around us, their eyes flicking between the scene and me. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, some even judging. But I didn't care about them. All I could see were the faces of the two people who were supposed to be proud of me. Faces now full of disdain and rejection. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The warmth I had carried all morning was gone, replaced by an icy disbelief that seeped into my bones. The applause, the music, the cheers, it all faded into background noise as I sat there, feeling smaller than I ever had. I wasn't just hurt. I was invisible. And yet, beneath the shock and the pain, a tiny, stubborn thought flickered. If this is the reality of them, then I will find my own reality. I will not let their rejection define me. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was the raw, empty ache of being disowned on what should have been the most important day of my life. After the ceremony, I didn't know where to go. I drifted away from the crowd, away from the lingering congratulations and laughter, like a ghost wandering through a world that no longer felt mine. The air outside the auditorium was crisp, but it didn't wake me up. The sounds of the city, cars, distant chatter, birds, blurred into a dull hum, almost like the world itself was muted. I just wanted to disappear somewhere quiet, somewhere. I could try to make sense of what had just happened. I found a bench tucked behind a row of trees, far enough from the parking lot to feel isolated. I sat there, cap in hand, staring at the tassel, turning it over and over between my fingers. The reality of being disowned weighed down on me like a physical force, pressing into my chest, making it hard to breathe. I could feel every heartbeat, each one a dull, relentless drum echoing the same thought. How could they? I remembered the mornings when my mom would wake me up for school, brushing my hair back, smiling and saying, "You'll make us proud today." I remembered my dad waiting at the bus stop in the freezing cold just to see me off, waving until I was out of sight. Those memories felt like shards of glass now, beautiful but sharp enough to cut. How could people who once seemed so full of love become strangers in a single moment? I let myself cry there, silently, because there was no one around to witness it. No one to tell me to stop being dramatic or to toughen up. Just me, the cold metal of the bench beneath me, the wind brushing against my face, and the unbearable weight of betrayal. I hated how small I felt, how powerless. And I hated how much I still longed for a sign that maybe, just maybe, they had made a mistake. The more I replayed their words in my head, the more they burned into my memory. The finality of it, the way they didn't even flinch, didn't waver, was a slap that I couldn't recover from quickly. I wondered if I had misstepped somewhere, if some invisible rule had been broken, some unspoken expectation failed. Was I ever enough for them? I asked the empty bench. Did I ever truly belong? I noticed small things I hadn't paid attention to before, the sound of my phone buzzing quietly in my bag, a reminder that the world still moved on outside of my bubble of pain. I didn't pick it up. I didn't want anyone else's voice right now. I just needed to feel this, even if it hurt, even if it made me feel unbearably alone. Hours passed in silence, and I realized that something had shifted inside me. The grief was sharp, but underneath it, a strange clarity started to form. I had been invisible to them today. Their approval, their presence, it was gone. And while it crushed me, I started to understand that my life didn't have to stop here. I had to find a way to process the betrayal, to reconcile the past with this moment. For the first time, I understood that being disowned wasn't just about loss. It was also a crossroads. And though I couldn't see the path clearly yet, I knew. I had to find it. I had to survive this. Somehow I walked home that evening with a heaviness in my chest. But there was also a strange flicker of something else, something I hadn't felt in years: curiosity. Anger and heartbreak had dulled into a quiet, simmering ember, and my mind, ever restless, started to wander. That's when I remembered it, the secret. The one thing my parents had buried so deep that I had nearly forgotten it existed. It wasn't something I had stumbled upon recently. I had known pieces of it, fragments of whispers from when I was younger. Little inconsistencies, strange phone calls I wasn't supposed to overhear, documents left carelessly in drawers, faces shifting when certain topics came up. At the time, I'd shrugged them off, assuming everyone had secrets, assuming my parents' life behind closed doors wasn't mine to question. But tonight, that memory burned differently. I could picture it vividly. The day I found the envelope tucked behind my dad's study books, the edges worn, the writing familiar yet cautious. I had been curious, and curiosity had betrayed me. Inside were letters, legal papers, and photographs, evidence of a truth they had spent years hiding. At the time, I had tucked it back, pretending I hadn't seen it. Out of fear, out of loyalty, out of not wanting to shatter the illusion of family. But now, in the aftermath of being cast aside, the fear had faded. The anger had carved out space for clarity. Maybe, just maybe, this changes everything. Maybe now they can't deny it. I thought, a shiver running down my spine. I clenched the envelope in my hand, feeling the creases dig into my fingers. The weight of it was heavier than I remembered, heavier than the grief that had settled over me earlier. I walked into my room, slamming the door behind me, the sound echoing like a punctuation mark on the day's chaos. The familiar smell of my childhood, books, faint incense, and old laundry, mixed with the raw, metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth. I opened the envelope, unfolded the letters carefully, letting my fingers trace the writing as if reading it again might give me courage. The documents revealed a truth that couldn't be ignored, a reality my parents had tried to control, hide, and twist over the years. And now, with their rejection laid bare in front of the entire world, the secret was no longer just a whisper behind closed doors. It was a weapon, Yes, but also a lifeline. It was something I could use to reclaim the power they had tried to strip from me. I sat there, envelope in lap, heart thumping, mind racing. A strange combination of fear and exhilaration pulsed through me. I had been invisible to them today, dismissed, discarded. But this could be the first time they couldn't ignore me. The first time they couldn't silence the truth. And as I stared out the window at the fading sunlight, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was ready. Ready to confront them. Ready to expose what had been hidden. Ready to take control of the narrative of my life. The ember had become a spark, and it was enough to ignite something that could no longer be contained. That I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My mind kept replaying every moment of the day, every cold glance, every dismissive word. But beneath the grief, beneath the ache of rejection, there was that spark, the secret. And with it, a plan began to form. I had to see how far I could push, how much they could deny. I needed to feel their reactions firsthand, to know whether this would actually matter to them. The next morning, I found myself lingering in the kitchen while my parents were making breakfast. The smell of coffee and toast should have been comforting, normal, but it wasn't. The silence between us felt heavier than ever, and I could see the tension in the way my mom's hands shook slightly as she poured the milk, the way my dad avoided meeting my eyes as if the floor were safer than any conversation. That I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice before speaking. "We need to talk," I said. No preamble, no apologies, just those 3 words. My heart was hammering in my chest, every beat echoing in my ears. They froze. I could feel their bodies stiffen, the invisible walls they had built rising instantly. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom's eyes flicked away, darting toward the stove like it would give her an escape. I slid the envelope across the counter, careful to place it where both of them could see it. "Do you remember this?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, almost conversational, though my hands were trembling. Their reactions were immediate, but not in the way I expected. My mom's hand hovered over the papers, fingers twitching like she wanted to grab them and destroy them. My dad exhaled sharply, a low, controlled hiss that betrayed the tension he was trying to mask. And then silence. That unbearable, suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on for minutes. Even though it could have been seconds. That I realized then that I had power, at least for a moment. Their faces told the truth before their words could. I could see the flicker of recognition, the brief pulse of fear, the sharp spike of guilt. They hadn't expected me to remember. They hadn't expected me to be brave enough to confront it. And now I was standing there, steady, holding the key to something they had spent years burying. I spoke again, my voice quieter this time, almost intimate. "I know what you've been hiding. I know the truth, and I'm not afraid to show it." My eyes locked on theirs, searching for any sign of deflection, any hint of remorse, any weakness. And then came the shift, a subtle tightening of shoulders, a flicker of panic in my mom's eyes, a rigid nod from my dad, as if they were realizing they could no longer control the narrative. I felt a thrill I didn't expect, a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time since they disowned me, I wasn't powerless. For the first time, I had their attention. Asterisk, I didn't speak again that morning. I didn't need to. The envelope sat there, a silent challenge, and the tension hung thick in the kitchen. I left before they could respond, my heart still pounding, my mind swirling with the possibilities. One thing was certain. The game had begun, and I was no longer just a player. I held the rules in my hands. It wasn't easy. My hands shook as I unfolded the papers, one by one, letting the evidence speak before I even said a word. Every photograph, every letter, every document told the story my parents had spent years trying to bury. And now, it was all in front of them, undeniable, unshakable. I remember their faces, the first flicker of recognition, the widening of eyes, the quick inhale that betrayed their shock. My mom's hands hovered over the papers, trembling slightly, like she was afraid to touch them, afraid to acknowledge that the truth was finally visible. My dad's jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. For the first time, I saw them not as untouchable figures of authority, but as fallible, flawed humans. I spoke slowly, deliberately, each word cutting through the thick tension of the room. "This is everything. Everything you try to hide. I've known pieces of it for years, and now, you can't deny it." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and sharp, like a blade suspended over all of us. The memory flashed behind my eyes. Me as a kid, sneaking into my dad's study, finding the envelope tucked behind textbooks. I had known then, in a small, fearful way, that the truth existed. Back then, I had buried it in the back of my mind, out of fear and respect. But now it was my shield, my sword, my voice when mine had been silenced for so long. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and irregular, echoing in the space between us. My parents shifted, unable to meet my gaze, and I realized, in that suspended moment, that I had changed the power balance. For once, the secret wasn't theirs to control. That I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication because finally, the truth could no longer be twisted or denied. Sorrow because the moment wasn't what I had imagined when I dreamed of standing proud on my graduation day, surrounded by love and support. This was raw, messy, explosive, and it was mine. My mom's voice finally broke the silence, soft and almost unrecognizable. You shouldn't have. But I cut her off, shaking my head. I had to. You left me no choice. You disowned me in front of everyone. This is just the truth finally catching up to you. And in that moment, I saw the flicker of guilt, the pulse of regret, even the shock that they weren't in control anymore. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. I just stood there, breathing heavily, letting the impact of what I had revealed sink in. It was a strange, liberating feeling. Pain, yes, but also power, clarity, the first sense of real agency I had felt in years. I had no idea how this would change the family dynamic, or if it would ever heal the cracks. But I knew one thing. The truth was out. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible anymore. The minutes after the revelation stretched on like hours. The house felt charged, almost alive, vibrating with unspoken tension. My parents moved like shadows, circling each other and me, searching for footing in a space that had suddenly become unrecognizable. Every glance, every sigh, every stiff gesture carried weight. My mom's voice broke first, sharp and trembling. How could you dig this up after all these years? Her anger wasn't just about the secret. It was about being exposed, about losing the illusion of control she had clung to for decades. My dad followed, colder, tighter. You had no right. This changes nothing. But I could see it in his eyes, the subtle flicker of panic, the realization that he couldn't rewrite history. That I felt my own pulse rise. Anger, disbelief, and an odd, fierce exhilaration coursed through me. I had waited for this moment, yet it was nothing like I expected. The adrenaline made my hands tingle, my chest ache, and yet I stood firm. I wasn't shaking anymore, not from fear. I was standing in the storm, ready to face whatever came next. Voices rose, overlapping, chaotic. I remembered every time my parents had dismissed my achievements, every glance of disappointment that wasn't warranted, every subtle message that I wasn't enough. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over, but I forced myself to breathe, to let the room absorb the weight of what had been revealed. That a flashback hit me. A quiet Sunday morning years ago when I had proudly brought home a project, and their praise had been lukewarm, distracted. I had smiled anyway, desperately seeking approval, clinging to the small shred of pride I thought I deserved. The memory stung, sharper now, because I realized it had been a pattern, a lifelong lesson in conditional love. I said nothing at first, just let the chaos swirl around me. But then a thought surfaced. This isn't just about anger. It's about clarity, about finally putting the pieces together. I could see it in their expressions: guilt, frustration, even a flash of fear. My secret wasn't just a revelation. It was a mirror reflecting their choices back at them. The argument continued, voices echoing through the house, punctuated by slammed doors and sharp breaths. I could hear my own heart pounding louder than their words, a reminder that I was alive, aware, finally unshackled. And amid the tension, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't need them to apologize, to forgive, or to understand. Their reactions didn't define me anymore. Hours later, after the voices had dimmed, I sat alone in my room, chest still tight, hands still trembling slightly. I felt drained, raw, yet strangely alive. The fallout hadn't ended. They would process this revelation in their own time, but I had survived. I had faced the storm, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of control over my own life. Even as the anger lingered, a new understanding began to form. Pain can be transformative. Heartbreak can be empowering. And sometimes, exposing the truth is the only way to reclaim your own voice. Days passed, and the chaos of that revelation began to settle, though the scars remained. I found myself alone more often than not, seeking quiet corners of my home, wandering streets in the evening when the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver. At first, I thought being alone would deepen the ache, but instead, it gave me space to breathe, to think, to process. That I started to replay the events in my mind, not with bitterness this time, but with clarity. The shock, the anger, the heartbreak, they were all part of a story I hadn't been ready to tell myself before. And now, seeing the truth laid bare, I realized that the rejection I had felt wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was theirs. Their inability to love unconditionally, their fear, their secrets. All of it was theirs, not mine. That I remembered a moment from years ago, one I had buried deep in my memory, sitting in my room as a teenager, staring out the window, while the rain tapped lightly on the glass. I had felt small then, invisible, powerless. And yet, even in that storm, I had made a silent promise to myself. I will not let them define who I am. That promise, forgotten in the chaos of daily life, resurfaced now, stronger than ever. That I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper in messy, looping handwriting. I wrote about the heartbreak, the anger, the shock, and even the small victories. The moment I realized I held the truth, the first time I felt their uncertainty. Writing became a ritual, a way to release the heaviness in my chest and replace it with understanding. I also allowed myself to feel the grief fully, without judgment. I cried when memories of their rejection came. I laughed when I remembered small, fleeting moments of childhood joy, and I sat in silence when nothing seemed sufficient to express the weight of it all. Through these moments, a subtle transformation began, a quiet confidence, a sense that even without their validation, I could stand tall, own my achievements, and embrace my story. One evening, sitting by the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in muted pinks and deep purples, I finally understood. Healing doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't change the past, but it gives you a path forward, a way to reclaim your life from the shadows of those who tried to diminish you. That I wasn't fully whole yet. I still felt the sting of betrayal, the echo of their words, the absence of their support. But I had begun to build something new, a sense of self that wasn't dependent on their approval. For the first time, I could see a future where my achievements, my choices, and my truths mattered, because they belonged to me, not to them. And in that quiet realization, I felt the first true flicker of peace, small but undeniable, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm that had lasted far too long. The morning air felt different that day, fresher somehow, carrying a quiet promise. I walked out of my room with my graduation cap in hand, my gown neatly folded over my arm. The sun caught the edges of the fabric, making it glow, and for the first time since that fateful ceremony, I felt a sense of ownership over it. Not because anyone else approved, but because it belonged to me. That I remembered the applause I had imagined months ago, the pride I had longed to see in my parents' eyes. But now, the vision had changed. The pride didn't need to come from them. It was mine. I had earned it, fought for it, survived heartbreak, and confronted truths that had been buried for years. That made it real. That made it mine. As I walked to the stage, this time alone, but unafraid, I felt the weight of my past lift slightly. With every step, the memories of rejection, the anger, the betrayal, they were still there, like shadows at the edge of the light, but they no longer held me captive. Each step forward was a choice, a statement. I exist. I've endured. I'm still here. I reached the stage and placed the gown over my shoulders, the silky fabric brushing against my skin like a quiet affirmation. The tassel swung lightly as I adjusted my cap, the subtle sound of movement grounding me in the present. I breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of life in my chest, the rhythm of my heartbeat telling me I had survived, and more importantly, I had grown. When my name was finally called, I walked across the stage with steady, deliberate steps. There were no familiar faces in the audience waiting to cheer, but that didn't matter. The cheers I felt came from within, from the knowledge that I had overcome, that I had reclaimed my story from secrecy and rejection. Each step was a victory, a declaration that I was no longer defined by others' approval, but by my own truth. And strength. I lifted my hand to shake the person handing me the diploma and took it with a quiet smile. I held it, feeling its weight, and realized that today, the day I had once thought would be marred by heartbreak, had become a symbol of something far greater: resilience, self-respect, and the courage to face the world on my own terms. Yes, I stepped down from the stage. The sun breaking through the clouds outside mirrored the feeling in my chest. I wasn't just moving forward from this day. I was moving forward from the years of conditional love, from the shadows of secrets, from the pain that had threatened to define me. Today, I was free. Today, I was whole in a way they could never take from me. I walked into the crowd of friends and strangers with a lightness I hadn't felt in years, letting the wind brush against my face, letting the world witness my survival. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need anyone else's approval to know that I had arrived.